So let's start by talking about the arteries. Then we'll talk about the veins, and last of all, I'm sorry, the capillaries, and then last of all, we'll discuss the veins. So there's a lot of arteries, as you can see, throughout the body. These are not even all of them. But for the purposes of this class and for your unit exam, you're only going to be asked about these ones. So the arteries to know are the aorta. So here is the left ventricle of the heart, which would pushes blood out through the aorta, which then goes up and then descends down. Before it does that, though, you can see that you have these two major arteries that come out from the aortic arch. So this is called the brachiocephalic trunk right here. Here's another brachiocephalic trunk. And then coming up from the brachiocephalic trunk are the carotid arteries. So right there, there's the carotid artery, and then there's another one. And they take blood through your entire head and face and neck. The blood obviously has to pass through the blood-brain barrier before it can actually feed the blood, but this is going to just kind of like encircle your entire brain and feed all of the muscles and skin in your scalp and your face and stuff like that. You also, going back to the brachiocephalic trunk, you also have the oops, I forgot the coronary arteries. So let's start with the coronary arteries actually. So as the blood goes out through the aorta, some of that blood is also going to pass through the coronary arteries right here. And you can see that they just snake around the entire heart itself. That's because the heart is also a muscle. The heart also needs blood in order to survive. So the heart is pumping blood to itself through the coronary arteries to feed itself. And if you have a blockage in a coronary artery, you're going to end up starving your heart muscle, and that leads to a heart attack. Okay, so we've got the coronary arteries. We talked about the carotid artery. We identified the brachiocephalic trunk. So next, let's get to the arteries that feed the arm. So here's the brachiocephalic trunk. There are the carotid arteries again. And then the brachiocephalic trunk is going to descend down your arm. And once it does, it's called the brachial artery. And then right here, once it reaches the lower arm, it's going to split into the radial artery, which is the lateral one, and the ulnar artery, which is the medial one. And just remember, like we talked about last semester, the radial artery is the one that goes towards your thumb, and the ulnar artery is the one that goes towards your pinky. And then last of all, you have the aortic arch, and then you have the descending aorta right there. And you have the descending aorta then has to split at your pelvis to feed the lower part of your body. So the place where it splits into this upside down V, that would be the iliac artery there. And you have the iliac artery there as well. And then it's going to go down towards your leg, and at this point it's called the femoral artery. And the reason why it's called that is because, as you can see, it runs along your femur. There are a bunch of other arteries that are important in here in the middle region that feed your major organs, as well as up here, the ones that feed your head. We'll talk about them in a separate lecture, but for this lecture, these are the arteries that you need to know. Okay, so an overview of arteries. Arteries move blood away from the heart, and they do operate at high pressure because when the ventricles pump the blood out, that is where the pressure is highest. And then as the blood passes through all of your cells and delivers water and nutrients and things like that, then the pressure lessens. You do have a smaller lumen, and on top of that, the lumen can be constricted by a process called vasoconstriction. Vaso meaning vascular or blood vessel, and constrict meaning it gets smaller. It also can be relaxed, so that's called vasodilation. Dilation meaning it gets bigger. And the um, there are different things that can cause vasoconstriction and vasodilation, but the primary one is activation by the sympathetic nervous system. Now, because the ventricles are pumping the blood with such force, and you have such high pressure going through of the blood going through the arteries, you don't need to do much to control the direction of the blood flow. It's always going to flow away from the heart. So you don't need any valves here. You will need valves when we get to veins, and we'll talk about why when we get to that slide. And then once again, the tunica media, this smooth muscle layer, is much thicker, and it will contain collagen and elastic fibers that further reinforce the strength and structure of the tunica media. And that is to ensure that the blood vessels are able to constrict and dilate appropriately so that you're directing the right amount of blood flow to different parts of the body. So here you can see this is what normal vascular tone looks like, but if it's activated by the sympathetic nervous system, then some blood vessels will vasodilate to feed the parts of your body that need it with more blood, and other blood vessels will vasoconstrict so that you're shunting blood away from parts of the body that don't need it towards parts of the body that do need it when you're under high stress.